G'day, Trooper Cody and Steve with one of our light horse videos. Or maybe I shouldn't call it a light horse video. This is a subscriber request, and I always try to answer subscribers' requests, but sometimes they can be off topic. So you might notice that I've got sunglasses on. Well, when I make our videos and when I go on an Anzac Day or any official parade, I try to be as authentic as possible. No sunglasses, no inappropriate wristwatch, no mobile phone, no taking selfies. I don't do any of that sort of thing. I try to be as appropriate as possible, even down to the haircut. So you say, why? I'm wearing sunglasses. Well, actually what I'm wearing, now whether you can see it, what I'm actually wearing is a pair of World War I German aviator glasses. That might give you a clue as to what the topic is. I'll just show you. And there's even the pouch. These were a gift by a friend, and you certainly know who your friends are when you get a gift like this. It even came with a certificate of authenticity. So you might have guessed the topic is about when a horse gallops, it has all 4 feet off the ground and it feels like flying. No, I'm just kidding. The actual topic is Baron von Richthofen. The Baron von Richthofen was born in Poland on the 2nd of May 1892. He was born to a very prominent Bavarian family, and that's what his title, Baron, is. It's hard to explain when you're from a different culture, but he was nobility, despite the fact that he wasn't the eldest son. He was born in 1892, and when he's 11, he enters military school and graduates at the age of 18 in 1911. He goes off to the Ulan Cavalry and graduates as a junior officer and as a cavalry officer, and he goes to the Eastern Front. He goes to Russia, but he has a non-combat role, and he's not very happy about the fact that he is more in supply and transport than a dashing cavalry officer. So when World War I breaks out in 1914, he finds that he's still not in combat. In 1914, he's a cavalry officer and he is still not in combat, but he hears about these new flying machines, and so he asks to be transferred to the German Flying Corps. That happens, but he's only transferred as an observer, not as a pilot, and still has no flying lessons. That was in May of 1915. He then gets transferred in August of 1915 to the Western Front. While he's there, while still only an observer, he shoots down his first aircraft. Because he was only an observer, not a pilot, this isn't credited to his tally, but it was his first kill. He then begins, in October 1915, he begins pilot training, and in March of 16, he's in combat. And on the 26th of April 1916, a neighbour is making a bit of noise, distracted us. So in March of 1916, he's actually in combat as a pilot, and he shoots down his first aircraft as a pilot. Once again, however, this is not credited to his end tally. And from memory, I think that was because the aircraft fell in Allied lines, not behind German lines, and so it wasn't classed as confirmed. On the 17th of September 1916, he has his first confirmed kill, which was Tom Rees. And when he did this, he then decided that he was going to, I was going to use the word celebrate, but he used the word honour. He was going to honour each of his victims by having a small silver cup made in honour of that pilot, and he had them made in Berlin. And every time he got a kill, he would have one of those cups made. What eventually happened is, by the time he got to 60 kills, the war was going so badly for Germany, there was no longer any silver left in Germany, no jeweller's shops. The jeweller in Berlin, who was making the cups for him, said he could no longer obtain silver anywhere, and did von Richthofen want the cups made in some other metal, and von Richthofen chose no, he'd stop having them made. So 60 was the last one. All along, von Richthofen was flying various aircraft, contrary to, we all sort of think about the Red Baron in his red Fokker triplane, the three-winged aircraft, but contrary to the reality is he liked to swap and change between aircraft because he wanted agility over speed. And so one of the finest aircraft of the First World War, all sides, was the Fokker D7. You can look that up for yourself if you're really that interested. But the Fokker D7, fabulous aircraft, incredibly efficient, and although the Baron never actually got to fly one of those himself, he was very much involved with Anthony Fokker in the design and the final outcome of that aircraft. So as I say, he was really well known with his Fokker triplane, the three-winged aircraft. And as a sort of a funny aside, I was a huge aviation buff, if you like, when I was a child. That was the 1950s, and I loved Biggles books, and I knew just about everything there was to know about World War I and World War II fighter aircraft. A bit about bombers, but mainly the fighter aircraft. And so a TV show was going to start. It was heralded, I know. It was heralded as going to be the greatest TV show ever seen, and all these claims were made about it. And when I saw it was advertised, I sat down in great anticipation the first night to watch it. And that was because the show was called Monty Python's Flying Circus. And I was so looking forward to seeing this World War I aviation show. And that was because von Richthofen started putting together more and more and more aircraft, developing huge wings of fighter aircraft, and they were very mobile. The hangars and the quarters for the aviators and the mechanics were all canvas. The planes were kept under canvas, the guys slept under canvas, and so they were very, very mobile, and that's how they got the nickname, if you like, of being a flying circus. Of course, I found out when I was a kid in the 50s in the 60s, that Monty Python's Flying Circus was absolutely nothing to do with World War I aviation. Okay, so in January of 1917, von Richthofen's awarded the Blue Max, the highest of all military honours that the German military can give to a member of the military, the Blue Max. And very shortly after, it's only a matter of weeks after, von Richthofen shot. He receives a serious head wound. He is operated on, he recovers from it. He is told not to fly anymore. And people who knew him said that once he recovered from that head wound, his personality changed. This does have a lot of bearing on what follows, because von Richthofen was keen to get back in the air, was keen to get back leading his circus, but all the evidence, medical evidence, told him he should not do this. He noticed himself that after he landed an aircraft, once he was back on the ground, the thing he said he noticed was severe nausea once he was back on the ground. There's no doubt he was suffering due to having this head wound. What did the German military think of this? He was their greatest hero. He was their highest decorated officer. He had massive kills, number of kills. He was known throughout the Allies as the Red Baron. Everyone knew him. What did the military think? Interestingly, the military was split 50-50. Half of the German military said this man must be stopped from flying and must become our mascot. A terrible word to use there, but they wanted him to become the PR machine for Germany. And the other half of the military said, no, he is of such detriment to the enemy, puts the fear in the enemy, he is such a weapon in himself, we must let him keep flying. So because the military couldn't come to a decision, von Richthofen himself kept flying. So, on the 21st of April 1918, von Richthofen is a mere 25 years old. Think of yourself when you were 25. If you're my age, 70, and you think back to when you were 25, you were just a child really at 25. So at 11 a.m. in the morning, von Richthofen is chasing a Canadian pilot. The Canadian pilot is very inexperienced. You can imagine how terrified he must have been to be in combat. Von Richthofen had the thing, if you like, where he painted his whole aircraft red. Every part of his aircraft was red because he wanted people to know, hey, it's the Red Baron, von Richthofen. So here's this inexperienced pilot, terrified pilot, and all he can think to do is dive and get down on ground level. Now, von Richthofen had survived as long as he had because he had a code of practice that he hammered into all his pilots. And that code of conduct, that policy, if you like, was 1. Never cross over the trenches into the Allied side. Never. Never go to an altitude that you might come under ground fire. Never go low. Never fly in a straight line. Continually jink. So that they were the 3 rules that von Richthofen insisted all his pilots follow. What happened at 11 a.m. that day? The Canadian pilot goes down very low to the ground, terrified, probably can't think straight. And what does von Richthofen do? He screams down low. He breaks his own rule. He's really low. He's on the wrong side of the lines. He's across the trenches, chasing the Canadian pilot deeper into Allied territory. And what else does he do? He just fixates on that Canadian plane, fixates, and goes after him to shoot him down. 3 rules that he had, 3 rules that he broke. Now here is where we come to the interesting part, because in 2018, I was lucky enough to be in London with my youngest son, who was doing uni in England. And we went to the Imperial War Museum at Lambeth in London. And when we were there, we were going to go and see the von Richthofen display that's there. When we're in the line heading up towards it, we're behind a person that wasn't English. Oh look, I don't want to be rude, but we were behind an American father and his son was probably only 10 or 11. And as we were in this line getting up there, this American in 2018 was telling his son all about how von Richthofen was shot down by the Canadian pilot Roy Brown. He went into great detail explaining this story to his son. I'm standing right behind him with my son, who at the time was an adult man, remember? And I'm thinking, should I say anything or shouldn't I? Should I correct this bloke or shouldn't I? And in the end I didn't, and we turned the corner and there it was, all written about the Canadian didn't shoot von Richthofen down, an Australian machine gunner did. So hooray, at least the Imperial War Museum has it right now. But what happened at the time? The Poms, the English hated the Australians. They were bad disciplined, they were shocking soldiers, they were insubordinate, And so there was no way in God's earth they were going to say an Australian machine gunner, an ordinary digger, a private, just a bloke, shot down one of the World War I's greatest figures. There's no way they were going to say that. So what had happened is when the panicked Canadian pilot had headed for the ground and von Richthofen came down behind him, Roy Brown was in an aircraft and he was there too. The authorities then said, this is the pilot that shot down von Richthofen. Now in later life, after it happened, and when that Canadian pilot was asked about it, much to the man's credit, he would never talk about it. He wouldn't give talks, wouldn't give speeches, wouldn't talk to the newspapers. He didn't want to talk about it. The reality was, he knew he hadn't shot down von Richthofen. He was too far away, too much higher, the wrong angle, and he knew he hadn't shot him down. Now what happened is that the Australians always said they shot the Red Baron down. The English powers to be said, no way, did a digger shoot this man down. He was shot down by the Canadian. But what actually happened, of course, modern forensics. And so there is no doubt von Richthofen was flying low, he was flying straight, he was in something of a valley when he was flying low. When they they exhumed his body and they examined his body, and what they could plainly see is a bullet had entered upward to direct. What they could see was the bullet had entered upward from the ground upward into his armpit and out of his chest. There was no doubt. He could never have been shot by an aircraft because he was so low, all the other aircraft was up here. He had to have been shot by ground fire. Now when you look at who shot him, even in Australia, shades of Facebook arguing, even in Australia there is argument as to who actually shot the Red Baron down. So if you look at it, the nearest machine gunner to where the plane was shot and seen to be hit and seen to hit the ground, the nearest machine gunner was Sergeant Cedric Popkin, operating a tripod-mounted Vickers 303 belt-fed machine gun. And he was of the 24th Machine Gun Battalion Company, 24th Machine Gun Company, Vickers. You've seen them in the movies. So the argument is two other gunners shot him, might have been the ones that shot him down, but the thing about them is both of those were much further away. The sergeant on the Vickers was of the Machine Gun Company. You would think he'd had a lot of practice. The two other machine gunners were with the Australian artillery. They were much further away, and both of those men, Snowy Evans and Robert Buell, both of those men were operating Lewis machine guns. Lewis has the small round drum on top. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it only holds 30 rounds, then another drum on top. Bit of a reputation for jamming. And so that is why the argument goes that it was Cedric Popkin that shot him, because he was definitely shot from the ground. It was definitely an Australian that did it, and the closer man and the man with a better weapon was Cedric Popkin. Okay, well on that note, I can't tell how dark it is because I'm wearing my German aviator sunglasses. Cody's done a great job as always. He's managed to not fall on the ground asleep. Cheers.